Are you ready to consciously create the life of your dreams? Yes. So what we're going to be exploring today, and I want to go back a little bit because when I was a young child, when I was just moving into this work, one of the things I said to myself is, I will never. How has it gone for you when you said, I will never? Well, one of the things I said I would never do was create like a 4-step or a 5-step or an 8-step process. So what we're going to be exploring today is my 5 steps to consciously creating your life, or the 5 steps to conscious creation. And my mind likes simple. So I've created an acronym, MOVIE. So are you ready to consciously create a movie for your life? A new movie. Carl Jung says it very simply: until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. Let me say that one more time. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And so I love that because the director is right there in that quote, right? So we're the director, we're the casting agent, we're the editor, we're the cinematographer. We get to choose the actors that are in our movie. But one of the things that occurred to me today is that we're also the screenwriter. In other words, we're writing the story. And we can either do an adapted screenplay, in other words, we can modify an old story, or we can have an original screenplay. And at this moment, we can actually release the past and step fully into true conscious creation, which is actually very, very simple. It's just unlearning and releasing everything I've ever been taught that is a limitation, because what we know is spirit, God essence, essential beingness is infinite. And so as we tap into that, we recognize that there's actually nothing to create at all, but just simply be in alignment and a vessel and an expression of that love, and then we watch the world respond. Now, I don't know if the world actually responds, like I said in the reading, or if it's that we open up to a different possibility, one that's been there all along. And the closing line of that reading, which thank you for listening to that paragraph from my new book, that's totally the unedited version. I probably shouldn't be reading that in public. No editor has looked at that yet. But the closing line is the truest for me about conscious creation. And that is, I can only step into the life I believe I deserve. So we're going to be talking a lot about that today. Before I get into creating a movie for your life, though, I want to pause for a moment and reflect on the power of vision. Specifically, what has happened in this community and how we've stepped into this new space. And I'm going to go back a year ago, because a year ago right now, my spiritual practitioner at the time was Joan Steadman, Reverend Dr. Joan Steadman, and I said, oh, Joan, I don't know if you're going to want to hear this, but it's come through in vision that it's time for me to release my position as senior minister. It's not what my mind wanted. And that's the key. Because I have learned to trust vision, but I also recognized it was going to quite possibly affect Reverend Joan. And so I'm not going to speak for her, but ultimately she spent her time in vision, and then it became clear to her that it was time for her to step into the senior minister position. Now, why am I saying all of this as it relates to conscious creation? If I would have stayed with the program of my mind only, because I don't think this is about completely releasing thoughts. If I would have been run by the program of my mind only, I would have said, no, I have spent the last decade getting to this moment where we're building this community, and I'm the senior minister, and that's been my idea all along. Right, you see this? Because this is really what the mind does. Wait a minute. Because, I like my stories. Well, thank you. We do too. But my story was, I need to be senior minister. But the vision was saying something different, and so I have come to trust that. And there have been key moments in my life when I have trusted that vision. Now, I want to be really transparent, though. It doesn't mean the mind always jumps right into agreement with that. So I catch a vision, and my mind is like, no, that's not what I want. So there does seem to be a little bit of a struggle between the mind and the vision. So the reason I share that is because I trust my vision, and because this community trusts the visioning process, which we're going to talk about more. Something much more powerful gets created than what my mind or what our individual mental faculty could create.
Amen.
And so, to be even more transparent, I had an attachment to that other space. My mind had an attachment to it. Allison's laughing because she's one of the people I process with. And when we trust vision, look what happens. And it happened in a week, as Reverend Jones said. It happened in a week when the vision starts to come through and we say yes to the deeper vision. We can move from unconscious creation to conscious creation. And in our teaching, we could also say into superconscious creation. Because the superconscious is the God consciousness that's the ultimate truth of who and what we are. So that's all just an opening to say we're going to talk about how we create a movie using the acronym and the 5-step process. But I want to start with a quote from the beloved Byron Katie. Since the beginning of time, people have been trying to change the world so that they can be happy. This hasn't ever worked because it approaches the problem backward. What we need is a way to change the projector mind rather than the projected. It's like when there's a piece of lint on the projector's lens. We think there's a flaw on the screen. And we try to change this person and that person, whomever the flaw appears on next. But it's futile to try to change the projected image. Once we realize where the lint is, we can clear the lens itself. This is the end of suffering and the beginning of a little joy in paradise. The metaphor works perfectly because if we're making a movie, we're also holding the projector. What if life is a blank screen and I'm literally projecting onto that screen? So the lent might be seen as my story, my BS belief systems, my ideas of limitation, my attachments, my preferences even. And Stephen Mitchell, who happens to be married to Byron Katie, that's interesting. In Stephen Mitchell's book, the second book of the Tao, one of my favorites, there is a quote in there that says, when we cling to a hairbreadth's distinction, heaven and hell are set apart. And when I hear that, my mind says, well, aren't I supposed to have perspectives or opinions? The answer to that as spirit is, do I want freedom? Do I want joy? Do I want happiness? Or do I want to keep writing the screenplay from the movie that I've been living up until this moment? So let's go through this 5-step process really quickly. I'm going to touch on each one of them because to me what happens when we start talking about consciously creating our life, usually we want to start with intention. Right? It's the first of the year, we start making goals, we start creating intentions. But to me, there are some really important, powerful steps that need to happen before that. Otherwise, we're only creating intentions based on the old program or the old BS beliefs. No matter how much we dedicate ourselves to changing our mind and working with our mind, the mind will always have limitation. It doesn't matter what that is. If my mind says, let's use money for example, I'm going to make $10 million this year. That's a limitation. Right? It might be a nice one for some of us, Maybe it's 100 million. Maybe it's 1 billion. The more I have, the more I can give. So, moving, making peace with the past. O, overcoming core false beliefs. V, visioning. I, intention setting. And E, embodying the vision. My intention is to talk mostly about the E because that's the topic today, embodying our infinite vision. But I'm going to touch on the other ones and why, in my experience, they're important. Because as I said, most of us, if not all of us, have kind of been trained that the first of the year we create our intentions or our goals or our New Year's resolutions. I'm actually doing a workshop on February 1st because by February 1st, we can ask the question, how are those intentions going? Or how are those New Year's resolutions going? Right? Because again, if we haven't made peace with the past, we're carrying that with us. It's profoundly simple. If I'm creating my life out of the old program, whatever lens I have on the projector will get projected onto the screen that we call reality. As a matter of fact, we've been trained to believe that the illusion is real and reality is the illusion. How do I know I'm projecting? When I hear myself saying things like, wow, one more time, this is happening. One more time, I'm in a job where this dynamic is happening. One more time, I'm in a relationship where the person just can't meet my needs. It's an uphill and a downhill, isn't it? So when I recognize that the circumstances of my life repeat over and over again, I recognize that's the limit, but not from a place of judgment. Because to me, it's really exciting. When I first came into this teaching, Reverend Maureen Bass said something that was really powerful. She said, you know how we often blame ourselves for the conditions of our life? Let's flip that to saying, look how powerful I am that I keep creating this scenario over and over and over and over again. Look how powerful I am. I'm practicing the law. What I believe I deserve is what I will step into 100% of the time. So if I find myself in these same communication dynamics, or this same level of wanting or yearning, I can recognize, look how powerful this is that I keep creating this. And if I can create it, what can I do?
Uncreate it.
Uncreate it. I remember back in the day, Reverend Joan, when we were in that little storefront space. We've been through some interesting incarnations. I think this is like the 9th home for What Was Awakened Living that started in 2012. A topic came up in our question and answer. Is it important to heal all our wounds? And in that conversation, what emerged, the wisdom that emerged is, what if we didn't have to heal all our wounds, but we could live beyond them? It's why I have shifted forgiveness to making peace with the past. Partially because FUVI isn't a great acronym, but because also the word forgiveness is so loaded. It's like the G word, right? So many words are really loaded, so forgiveness is one of those words for me because forgiveness implies rightness and wrongness. I'm going to be a really, really wonderful person and I'm going to forgive you for all the harm you've caused me. Right? A good friend of mine used to say, I'm not going to judge, but fasten your seatbelt, here comes the judgment. So I'm going to forgive you even though you've harmed me. But it works the other way as well. Oh, I've let that go, I've forgiven myself for that. Oh, it's fine. I personally use New Thought principles in that way for a decade. And it's okay. It's kind of like I'm thinking about the teachings of Jesus. It's taken us about 2,000 years to say, oh, now we know what he was saying. And that's really a short amount of time, actually. He wasn't saying, I'm the one and only, or I am the light of the world, and you are not. He was saying that we are the light of the world, and each of us is that light. So as I shift from forgiveness to making peace with the past, my mind can really understand that. Because here's the great news. And I want to say this, well, I'm just going to say it, and then you can see how you react to what I'm saying or respond. It doesn't matter what happened. What matters is what I call what happened. But it doesn't mean I'm going to bypass any pain that is associated with what happened. Because a lot of us, myself included, can do a spiritual bypass. And that's, again, that version of like, oh no, I'm fine, I've moved beyond that, I've let that go. Why do I still feel this way? Why do I keep replicating these relationships? So in order to create a new movie for our lives, we must first address something from the past that needs clearing. And when I say clearing, it doesn't necessarily mean healing, but it means I can live beyond that. Because if we use the word forgiveness, forgiveness is really a shift in consciousness. Because to me, if I'm living in martyr victim consciousness, I don't think it's possible to forgive. Because I have deeply entrenched ideas of right and wrong, and good and bad, and us and them. And from that level of consciousness, I don't think it's actually possible to forgive. Now, maybe some of you are more advanced than I am, and you can live in the idea of good, bad, right, wrong, and still move into forgiveness. But for me, it's a shift in consciousness of recognizing what if everything that ever happened in our life was fertilizer. So we've heard shift happens. We know where that came from. But I can also recognize it as the fertilizer for new growth. In other words, some of the most painful experiences of my life have been the most fertile for me awakening to a new way of being. Because one of the greatest gifts is that moment of frustration, or that moment of, I get to see where I'm still holding a story. What if that's the great news? What if every button that gets pushed, I recognize that it's not happening out there, it's happening in here, and that it's the projector. And when I'm curious about that piece of lint, then I now have taken the power back to recognize that I can clear my lens. In other words, make peace with the past. So if there is a story that keeps getting, maybe we have sequels. I'm going to keep going with the movie metaphor, right? Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4. As long as we can make money off the story, we're going to keep producing the movie, right? And in this case, the money metaphor might be I might get sympathy. I might be able to build a coalition. See, Deborah and I we can come together and we can say, can you believe she's doing that? And then she's in agreement with me and it gets stronger. The sequel comes out. And that really is what coalition building is about. We're going to come together in agreement. There's nothing inherently right or wrong about that, but my question is, do you want to keep repeating the same movie? Are you interested in Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, Part 4? Are you ready to write a new movie? And so, overcoming core false beliefs is simply recognizing that last line of the reading, which is, I can only manifest or step into the life I believe I deserve. And so if I'm coming from a place of not enoughness, my life will look like not enoughness. And if I don't recognize the power of that, I keep replicating it over and over and over again. And I'm trying to, as Byron Katie so beautifully said, trying to change the world so that I can be happy. And guess what? Some of you laughed at the beginning of that, which I appreciate, because what happens when I try to change the world so that I can be happy? Pain. Actually, more accurately, suffering. Right? At this level of consciousness, in our evolution of humanity, pain is a part of life. Suffering, as the Buddhists say, is optional. And suffering, to me, are those core false beliefs. It's that core belief of, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable, I'm not good enough. And the reason, by the way, I've created this 5-step process is because it reflects my own journey. And at any moment, I can find myself believing one of those again. right? Because I actually thought this was about reaching a particular level and never having what I call the human experience again. In other words, I used to call it, the acronym really wouldn't work, because I used to say releasing core false beliefs. That'd be fruity. That's not going to work. Forgiveness, releasing, that's the language I used to use, and language is limited, right? And then there's infinite beingness. So rather than an idea that I need to release all my core false beliefs, what if I can overcome them? In other words, what if I didn't have to do anything with those, but recognize they're not the truth? Thus the name core false beliefs. Can I find a place of compassion? We blessed the children earlier, and I love that Reverend Joan talked about the inner child, because my 5-year-old decided I was stupid. My 6-year-old decided the world wasn't safe. My 7-year-old decided there's something fundamentally wrong with me. And so the healing work for me is being able to create a space to come back and integrate that, not to release it. I had a pretty aggressive relationship with my inner child, and I didn't know it. But I've come to recognize that overcoming core false beliefs is actually honoring and recognizing the brilliant strategy of the little kid. I built a wall around my heart. So then we get to visioning. See, this is the great news. Rather than starting with intention setting, we spend some time, and for me it was 20 years, in making peace with the past. Thank you. And then the overcoming core false beliefs has been an ongoing. I recognize that place where I just got what we used to call triggered, but now I call activated, because trigger is giving you the power. You just triggered me. No, you activated something within me, and it's activating for my healing. Then we move into visioning, and I always want to honor Reverend Dr. Michael Beckwith, who has created a very simple formula for happy vision. And I'm going to say it really simply. It's not visualization, right? How many of us here have done the vision boards? They're really visualization boards, right? They're really visualization boards, because we're deciding what we want, and we're putting it on a board, and we're holding the energy of that and stepping into those possibilities that we created. For me, this is what happened. I did manifest it all. Everything on my vision board. And what happened for me is I literally internally said, this is all there is. It didn't do what I hoped. No, the beautiful boyfriend and the house on the hill and the Lexus and all those things that were on the vision board that did get manifested didn't really fundamentally shift what was happening internally. And so visualization comes from the mind. What do I want to create? Visioning comes from spirit. And when I say spirit, I mean the spirit essence that we are. Michael Beckwith says, until we have developed an intimate relationship with our true nature, an intimate relationship with our true nature, we will have an agreement with mediocrity. Slightly a paraphrase, you can see the real quote in this book. But we will have made an agreement with mediocrity. So visioning is about creating an intimate relationship with the true nature. Whatever word we use for that, God, essence, source, energy, divine beingness, source, love, light. We dedicate ourselves to spending time in the silence, and for me, that requires that I've done those first 2 steps so that I can listen from here instead of from here. Because we talk about the emotional heart sometimes, and it is important, but the emotional heart also has some wounding. Not good or bad, it just has that. Honoring that, tapping into the deep wellspring of inner wisdom, something more powerful comes up than my emotional heart, my intellectual mind, or my physical body can even understand. The greatest news, though, is this. Not only will life manifest rapidly like it did here in 1 week, but when we catch the vision from that deep place, we always have everything within ourselves to manifest that vision. We have enough money, enough energy, enough time, enough support, enough love. Because when I create from my mind, I notice myself getting exhausted trying to make it happen. But when I create from vision, and when I say I create, that's not really accurate. When I release, overcome, and recognize that something deep within me knows something so much more powerful. And as Michael Beckwith says, when we catch a vision, it is always bigger than what we would have thought. Look at this, it's bigger. And it's less money. I mean, we have less time too, but we have it for exactly what we need. And then some. So, when I trust vision, when I move, it says the longest 18-inch journey is from the head to the heart, but there's another one into the essential beingness. That core, that center. The Indian proverb is like we're a house with 4 rooms, and I call it pies: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. The intention with visioning is very simple. Drop in, listen intently, and sit with it, as Reverend John said. Then we move into intention setting. And what I want to close with in the last few minutes is talking about what it means to embody the vision. I'm not going to talk about intention setting. You have to buy my book to get that. Thank you, Reverend Roman. Embodying the vision for me is twofold. One, it is, yes, holding the energy of that which we want to create. That is a very powerful tool. I remember 20 years ago, 23 years ago, whatever it was, when I opened my first business, I would imagine myself every single day doing what it took to have that business open. And I remember I was creating a business plan, and someone said, well, you don't even have capital yet. No, I am holding the vision of that. I'm in the energy field of that which I want to manifest. That is powerful. But what we're really talking about in embodying the vision is something much deeper. When I know that I know that I know the truth of who and what I am as infinite beingness, that's what we want to embody. The individual vision or manifestation is a product of the mind. Like for me, it was, no, I like that space on Telegram. That's the expression. My life has been filled with that. I hope that I'm not alone in that. I get a vision, and then my mind's like, oh, I know exactly how this needs to look. Right? Thank you, Isabel, for laughing, for smiling. Recognition. So embodying the infinite vision is actually taking time to hold the energy or the frequency of essential beingness. In other words, it is arrogant to believe that I am not God. It is arrogant for any of us to believe we're anything other than source energy. And I know there are traditions that would be like, what are you saying? But if it's true that we're all a perfect expression or a perfect emanation of the one power and the one presence, then anything other than that is a lie. That's the old movie, and the sequel to the old movie, and the sequel to the sequel of the sequel of the old movie. So what I want to invite you to be with as we move fully into 2020, which of course we've made up that January 1st is a new year, but collectively there's a lot of power around it. I invite you to recognize the deepest truth of who and what you are, and recognize there's only one surrender, and that is to know that we are source, that we are love, that we are light. Returning to our original perfection, or as Michael Beckwith says, the spiritual blueprint that is within each of us. And when I first heard that, I thought that meant there was a specific plan, like an architectural plan. But what it means is the spiritual blueprint is the essential beingness, and it is infinite.